The maps used in first-person shooter games are extremely varied, from the maze-like levels of Doom 2 to the corridor-shaped stages used for set pieces in Call of Duty. Countless types of differing designs have been used since the genre's popularization and growth over the years. But for this video, in a time when the open-world setting is more widespread than ever, I would like to talk about a specific semi-linear model of gameplay, which is in my opinion seen at its very peak in games like BioShock, Metro Last Light and Wolfenstein The New Order. There will be some very light spoilers for each of these dropped throughout the video, but honestly it won't be any more than is already revealed by trailers. All three of these owe much to Half-Life, F.E.A.R, and Modern Warfare. Each of those titles either reinvented or immensely refreshed the genre, though they also represent a clear shift in development towards an increasingly scripted experience. The three games I'd like to explore today have gone against the grain by crafting an alternative. What they all have in common is the mostly linear and scripted core at their center, which branches off into multiple side tracks that any speedrunners would miss. These are the little hidden passages or even easily accessible sites just slightly off the beaten path that reward the more curious and investigative players. In a way, they headed in the opposite direction by taking COD 4's bombastic modernization and applying it to Half-Life's more complex maps. Another feature that they share with each other is more unique gameplay mechanics to spice the combat and exploration up a bit, setting them apart from many other shooters of their time by making them about much more than just pointing and firing your guns. In BioShock, we of course have the plasmids, special serums that basically gave the player superpowers, from generating electric shocks to spawning swarms of hornets into the faces of your enemies. In Last Light, this took the form of the gas mask and watch. As you wander around the inhospitably irradiated surface of the Earth, you must keep an eye on how much air you have left in your filters, as well as wiping any dirt or moisture off your visor. Finally, the New Order shook things up by allowing you to dual-wield even fully automatic rifles, creating opportunities for unlimited carnage and ultra-violence. I should point out that these games, especially BioShock, owe plenty of their mechanics to System Shock as well. This manifests itself in various ways, one of which takes the form of audio or written diaries that add to the narrative by either further developing the backstory or revealing the thoughts of an otherwise silent protagonist. This, however, is where they diverge from each other slightly. BioShock is the most traditional of the lot in that its player character doesn't speak throughout most of the experience. Similarly, Artyom from Metro follows in Gordon Freeman's footsteps, but we do get to hear his voice when waiting for each level to load. Finally, Wolfenstein is perhaps the most radical in its approach, as it takes a protagonist who was previously fairly quiet, speaking mostly in cutscenes if ever, and turns him into the main narrator of the story. Machine Games really gave Blazkowicz a strong and relatable personality for their soft reboot of the series.
To commission a portrait in service of your ego, General, you waste your pick.
Next up is yet another gameplay element that was borrowed from the legacy of Looking Glass. I am of course referring to stealth. In BioShock this may be the least developed, though we do get to hack turrets and security cameras, as well as mind-controlling human enemies. There is a greater focus there on turning your opponent's tools against them. In Last Light and The New Order, you can remain unseen and unheard for some time in many areas. You get to use throwing knives, and there are even takedowns that can be utilized to dispose of unsuspecting hostiles in the click of a button. Occasionally there will be quick time events for the player to win in order to save him or herself, a feature that was not present in BioShock as it was released earlier before it became trendy to include these in your shooters. Since it's the oldest and most classic of this group, BioShock also allows us to carry many weapons at the same time. Each of these firearms can also be upgraded. Wolfenstein, with its old-school twist, allows us to do the same, though as previously mentioned, not only does it give us the ability to fire two big guns at the same time, we can even dual-wield knives and attach silencers to our pistols. Moreover, there is a series of perks that unlock new skills depending on what your preferred playstyle is. On the other hand, although Last Light lets you upgrade your weapons with different attachments too, it severely limits the amount of ordnance you can carry with you at all times. But this is more of an atmospheric feature that fits its world rather than conformity to current standards in the genre, as scavenging for supplies and keeping an eye on your ammo count are also important aspects of Metro's gameplay. All three titles here give the player some explosives to play with too, while Metro and Wolfenstein sometimes allow us access to mounted armaments that can be detached. Overall, the New Order is possibly the most mobile and chaotic, as Blazkowicz can even slide like Nomad from Crysis. As you can see, these three games are anything but your typical modern military shooter. Wolfenstein even features lockpicking, something that we're used to seeing in the Elder Scrolls series and other action RPGs. The reason why they are so unique is in great part due to their semi-linear structure. Imagine if they followed Infinity Ward's recent formula. A game as scripted as that leaves practically no room for exploration. Not only are the levels limited by their tightly controlled structure, but they also heavily dictate the pace of the gameplay, as the player must quickly progress from one spectacular set piece to another. In the most ridiculous of instances, this boils down to artificially killing the protagonist when he or she takes too many steps to the left or right of the path to the objective. A semi-linear structure inspired by Half-Life has another very positive aspect to it. It allows for the telling of a more complicated and impactful story, leaving some room for decisions to be made by us, the gamers. BioShock is arguably the most political of the lot, since it is somewhat inspired by Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, though fortunately it soon turns into an engrossingly atmospheric critique of objectivism. It's set in a beautifully constructed Art Deco underwater utopia turned dystopia called Rapture. Player agency takes the form of our interactions with the Little Sisters here, whether we choose to liberate them from their nightmarish form or sacrifice them for our own gain instead. Metro's post-apocalyptic world is an equally grim one. Beneath its relatively straightforward FPS model is a purposefully cryptic moral point system, whereby we are rewarded for actions that are merciful, investigative and thoughtful. If we accumulate enough of these positive points, we are treated to an alternative good ending before the credits roll. Finally, I don't want to go into too much detail about the New Order's plot because it really is amazing, I could talk about it for days. To think that the only game to really go into detail about Nazi war crimes, the Holocaust and concentration camps, and do it in a sensitive and clever way, is a sci-fi alternate history shooter that glorifies outlandish violence, that just goes to show how much there is still left to cover for developers. In Wolfenstein, players must choose at a really early point in the story which of their comrades will survive and stay with us for the rest of the game. Both it and Last Light feature some romantic elements too, and the characters' lovers are both called Anya, funny enough. But I have to say that Blazkowicz's relationship with Miss Oliva is handled in a much smarter, more mature and most of all human way than what Artyom gets to experience. Last Light is considerably more awkward in how it handles love and sex. If I was to name the single best lesson learned, something to take from the design of these games, it would not be the engrossing atmosphere, the gripping stories, the wonderful graphics or the addictive gameplay, although these are amazing aspects of them too. Instead, it would be the flexibility of the entire experience. Think about it this way, the average game time of an orderly playthrough of Metro Last Light is between 10 and 12 hours. However, when I first played the game, I decided to pick the hardest difficulty and not kill any human opponents during my post-nuclear journey as Artyom. This was actually possible thanks to the addition of non-lethal takedowns. Instead of a meager 10 hours, I managed to double my playtime to a whopping 20 hours, and after that I still had plenty of collectibles to find and achievements to unlock. With Wolfenstein, the case was similar, as I had extended my first playthrough by 5 hours more than the median recorded online. The same can be said for BioShock. The beauty of semi-linear first-person shooter design like this is that it appeals to two entirely different groups of gamers. One that either doesn't want to or simply can't spare the time to explore every nook and cranny of each level. It still provides them with an extremely satisfying, story-driven product that is powered by top-notch gameplay. While others, who can and most likely will try to discover everything, are offered an even deeper and more rewarding experience. I honestly wish more developers would follow in the footsteps of these studios, since the open world or indeed strictly linear route is not always the best to take. Companies should seek to find a balance that works well for their individual game, for the pace of its gameplay and story, and so on. Well, I believe that's all I wanted to mention in this vid. Thanks very much for watching and good hunting, stalkers!